You want to build a windmill? She asked, her voice laced with skepticism. In your backyard? That's right, I replied, trying to sound as confident as possible. A large one, 50 feet tall, if possible. There was a long silence. And what's the purpose of this windmill? She asked cautiously. To generate clean energy, I said, truthfully, mostly, and to enhance the neighborhood's aesthetic. Sarah chuckled. Okay, she said. This is definitely a new one. Send me your address and I'll come take a look. I've always believed that a home should reflect the personality of its owner, that it should be more than just a box filled with furniture. It should be a reflection of your tastes, your interests, your soul. And for me, that meant incorporating small, classic touches, details that added character and charm without being ostentatious or over the top. That's why I decided to install the Weathervane. It wasn't some cheap plastic thing from a big box store. It was a beautiful antique piece, a handcrafted metal rooster that I'd found at a flea market during a weekend trip to the countryside. It was weathered, slightly rusty, and utterly charming. I mounted it on the peak of my roof, where it could catch the wind and spin freely, a subtle yet elegant addition to my otherwise unremarkable suburban home. I've always appreciated the small details, the subtle touches that add character to a home. A well-placed flower box, a charming garden path, a classic Weathervane. It wasn't about being flashy. It was about creating a sense of timeless elegance. Apparently, in Sunridge Estates, that was grounds for an HOA citation, I thought. As I admired my newly installed Weathervane, the rooster silhouetted against the afternoon sky. It was a simple pleasure, a small detail, but it made me happy. I should have known that any deviation from the bland, cookie-cutter aesthetic would attract the attention of the neighborhood's resident enforcer of uniformity. I just didn't realize how quickly or how vehemently that attention would manifest. The inevitable knock on the door came a few days later. It was a sharp, insistent rap, the kind of knock that conveyed authority, disapproval, and a complete lack of patience. Franklin Underwood III. The 3 was crucial, he'd insist, as if anyone would confuse him with some other Franklin Underwood. He was a retired bank executive with a permanent air of self-importance, a wardrobe that consisted entirely of golf attire, and a deep-seated belief that the HOA was his personal kingdom. He was the kind of guy who probably color-coded his sock drawer and considered beige to be a bold color choice. He stood on my porch, resplendent in his golf shirt and khaki slacks, his clipboard clutched in his hand like a weapon, his expression a mixture of smugness and disdain. "Mr. Carter," he began, his voice a dry, nasal drone, "I'm afraid I must address a matter of grave concern." He paused, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. "Your rooftop adornment." "My Weathervane?" I replied, feigning innocence. "What about it?" "It's outdated," he declared, his eyes narrowing. "It's unsightly. It simply does not conform to the modern aesthetic of our community." He said modern aesthetic, as if the neighborhood were some kind of cutting-edge architectural masterpiece, rather than a collection of nearly identical houses. "It disrupts the skyline," he continued. "It must be removed." I stared at him dumbfounded. "It's a Weathervane, Frank," I said, trying to remain calm. "It's a classic decorative feature. It's been around for centuries." "Centuries being the operative word, Mr. Carter," he retorted, his lips pursing. "We are a forward-thinking community. We embrace progress. Weathervanes are relics of the past. They have no place in Sunridge Estates." The HOA meeting was a farce, a carefully orchestrated display of suburban tyranny. The community center's multi-purpose room, with its beige walls and uncomfortable folding chairs, was filled with the usual suspects: the retirees, the busybodies, and the handful of Franklin Underwood III's loyal followers, all eager to uphold the sanctity of the neighborhood's bland uniformity. Franklin, perched at the head table like a king on his throne, launched into a prepared speech about the importance of maintaining a cohesive visual aesthetic and the detrimental impact of outdated and unsightly rooftop decorations. He projected a photo of my house onto the screen, the weathervane clearly visible, as if it were evidence of some heinous crime. "This weathervane," he declared, his voice dripping with disdain, "is a blatant violation of our community guidelines. It's rustic. It's agricultural. It simply does not belong in a modern, sophisticated neighborhood like Sunridge Estates." This is absurd, I thought, my internal monologue growing increasingly sarcastic. "My little weathervane is a threat to the neighborhood? It's a metal rooster, Frank. It's not a giant neon sign flashing obscenities." He went on to cite obscure bylaws, misinterpret zoning regulations, and generally paint a picture of my weathervane as a disruptive, dangerous, and aesthetically offensive addition to the neighborhood. There were other matters discussed, too. Mrs. Gable was being questioned over the color of her garden gnomes, too bright, and Mr. Henderson was in trouble for hanging a bird feeder, attracting unauthorized avian species. I tried to reason with them. I explained that the weathervane was a classic design element, that it was harmless, that it was, in fact, quite charming. I pointed out that it was no more disruptive than the satellite dishes, solar panels, and oversized inflatable holiday decorations that adorned many other houses in the neighborhood. But my arguments fell on deaf ears. Franklin Underwood III was not interested in reason, in logic, or in the concept of individual expression. He was interested in rules, in regulations, and in enforcing his narrow vision of suburban perfection upon everyone within his reach. The motion to prohibit all unapproved rooftop structures, including but not limited to weathervanes, antennas, and decorative sculptures, effective immediately, passed with a near unanimous vote. Franklin banged his gavel, a smug smile spreading across his face. I received the official HOA notice a few days later, a crisp white envelope containing a sternly worded letter and a threat of escalating fines. I had 14 days to remove the unauthorized rooftop structure or face the consequences. I stood on my roof, staring at the offending weathervane, the metal rooster silhouetted against the afternoon sky. I could comply, of course. I could take it down, surrender to Franklin's demands, and return my roof to its previous state of bland conformity. But something inside me rebelled. This wasn't just about a weathervane. It was about principle. It was about the right to express my own individuality, to add a touch of personality to my own home without being harassed by a power-hungry, aesthetically challenged tyrant. If Frank and the HOA were so obsessed with modernizing the neighborhood, then I'd give them modern. But I'd give it to them on my own terms. I'd give them something so large, so unexpected, so utterly un-Frank-like that it would make his perfectly manicured eyebrows twitch, I thought. A new idea, bold and wonderfully ridiculous, beginning to take shape in my mind. A windmill. A giant 50-foot windmill. It was modern, wasn't it? It was technically a wind-powered structure, not a weather vane. And it was, without a doubt, the most gloriously inappropriate response to Franklin Underwood III's demand for conformity that I could possibly imagine. It would harness the very thing he hated and put it to a new use. It would be a source of clean energy, at least in theory, a monument to sustainable living, and most importantly, a giant, spinning middle finger to the HOA's obsession with bland uniformity. Franklin Underwood III, you want a war on weathervanes? You've got one. Prepare to be windmilled into submission, I declared internally, a surge of defiant energy coursing through me. The battle lines were drawn, and I was ready to unleash the full force of my wind-powered rebellion. My transformation from mild-mannered homeowner to wind-powered warrior began, as all great acts of rebellion do, with research. I needed to know if my plan, as audacious as it was actually feasible. I needed to understand the physics of wind turbines, the local ordinances governing structures, and most importantly, the loopholes in the HOA bylaws. I dove into the world of renewable energy, learning about wind speed, blade design, and the surprisingly complex engineering that goes into harnessing the power of the wind. I discovered that residential wind turbines, while not exactly commonplace, were becoming increasingly popular, especially in areas with, let's just say, restrictive HOAs. My browser history went from antique Weathervane prices to residential wind turbine installation and how to calculate wind power efficiency in record time, I chuckled as I navigated the surprisingly vast online resources dedicated to wind power. I also spent hours poring over the dreaded HOA bylaws, searching for any clause, any phrase, any vaguely worded regulation that might prohibit my plan. And to my delight, and Franklin Underwood III's future dismay, I found nothing. There were rules about unsightly structures, of course, but there was nothing specific about windmills. There were regulations about noise pollution, but nothing that would prevent the gentle whoosh of rotating blades. And there were certainly no height restrictions that would limit the scale of my wind-powered energy feature. The HOA, in their obsession with controlling every blade of grass and every paint color, had overlooked the possibility of a wind-powered rebellion. They'd left the door wide open, and I was about to sail through it, on a gust of righteous indignation and a 50-foot windmill. I obtained the necessary permits from the city, careful to emphasize the green energy aspect of the project. Building a 50-foot windmill, I quickly realized, was not a DIY project. I needed professionals. I needed people who understood engineering, construction, and the intricacies of harnessing the power of the wind. I started by contacting a local engineering firm, explaining my situation, carefully omitting the HOA revenge aspect, and outlining my vision for a residential wind turbine installation. The engineer I spoke to, a woman named Sarah, thankfully not a previous Sarah, was initially bewildered. "You want to build a windmill?" she asked, her voice laced with skepticism. "In your backyard?" "That's right," I replied, trying to sound as confident as possible. "A large one. 50 feet tall, if possible." There was a long silence. "And what's the purpose of this windmill?" she asked cautiously. "To generate clean energy," I said truthfully, mostly, "and to enhance the neighborhood's aesthetic." Sarah chuckled. "Okay," she said. "This is definitely a new one. Send me your address and I'll come take a look." Sarah, it turned out, was a fan of unconventional projects. She arrived at my house, took one look at the space, and grinned. "This is going to be interesting," she said. Next, I needed a construction crew. I found a local company, Solid Foundations Construction, that specialized in custom-built structures. The owner, a burly man named Bob, yet another Bob, was initially confused by my request. "A windmill, huh?" he said, scratching his beard. "Never built one of those before. Usually it's just decks, patios, that sort of thing." "This is a bit different," I admitted. "Different is good," Bob said with a shrug. "Different is interesting. And frankly, after 20 years of building beige boxes, I'm ready for something interesting. His crew, a mix of seasoned carpenters and younger guys eager to prove themselves, shared his enthusiasm, albeit with a healthy dose of skepticism. They'd ask questions like, "So this windmill, it's really going to be 50 feet tall? And are we going to need, like, special wind-resistant nails for this job?" I assured them that we would use the best materials, the strongest nails, and the most wind-resistant construction techniques known to man. They looked at me, looked at each other, and then burst out laughing. But they were in. They were intrigued. And I suspected they were just as eager as I was to see the look on Franklin Underwood III's face when he finally discovered what was going on. The construction process was, to put it mildly, a spectacle. It began with the arrival of a series of trucks, each larger than the last, delivering massive wooden beams, heavy-duty hardware, and the components of the windmill itself. My quiet suburban backyard was transformed into a construction zone, a whirlwind of activity, noise, and controlled chaos. The foundation was poured, a massive concrete slab designed to support the weight of the towering structure. Then came the tower itself, a sturdy, latticework structure made of pressure-treated lumber, rising slowly but surely towards the sky. It was like watching a medieval siege tower being built, only instead of preparing to storm a castle, I was preparing to storm the HOA. The neighbors, understandably, were fascinated. They'd gather at the edge of my property, watching the construction unfold, their expressions a mixture of curiosity, amusement, and a growing sense of, what on earth is going on over there? Children pointed and gasped, dogs barked, and even the teenagers, normally glued to their phones, seemed impressed. Franklin Underwood III, of course, was not amused. He'd storm over, his face a mask of fury, and demand to know what I was doing. "I'm installing a wind-powered energy feature, Frank," I'd reply, with a perfectly innocent smile. "Embracing renewable energy, doing my part for the environment. You know, being a responsible citizen." I made sure to use phrases like sustainable living and reducing my carbon footprint. "It looks like a windmill," he'd sputter, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "It's inspired by windmills, Frank," I'd say vaguely. "It's a modern interpretation, very artistic." His eye twitches were becoming legendary. He knew I was up to something, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. And that, of course, was the beauty of the plan. And then finally it was done. My masterpiece. My monument to renewable energy. My giant HOA-defying windmill. It was magnificent. The wooden tower, 50 feet tall, stood proudly in my backyard, a beacon of defiance against the beige conformity of Sunridge Estates. The giant blades, crafted from lightweight but durable material, turned slowly and gracefully in the breeze, a mesmerizing display of kinetic energy. And the LED uplighting, strategically positioned at the base of the tower, illuminated the entire structure at night, creating a dramatic, almost ethereal glow. But the pièce de résistance, the detail that truly elevated the project to a new level of petty perfection, was the mural. I'd commissioned a local artist to paint a large, colorful mural on the side of the windmill's base, facing directly towards Franklin Underwood III's house. The mural depicted a stylized scene of a weather vane being blown away by a powerful gust of wind, and beneath it, in bold, playful letters, were the words, "Let the winds of change blow strong." It was magnificent. It was ridiculous. It was perfect. And it was all completely 100% HOA loophole exploiting, as far as I could tell, I thought, surveying my creation with a mixture of pride and amusement. It was a bold statement, a defiant gesture, and a constant, unavoidable reminder of Franklin Underwood III's impending doom. The stage was set. The windmill was complete. And the battle for suburban supremacy was about to begin. The unveiling of my 50-foot windmill was a moment I'd been eagerly anticipating, and Franklin Underwood III's reaction did not disappoint. I'd timed the completion of the project to coincide with his usual Sunday morning inspection of the neighborhood, ensuring that he'd be among the first to witness my glorious, wind-powered creation in all its towering splendor. And his reaction? It was priceless. It was a meltdown of epic proportions, a Karen-esque explosion of rage and disbelief that would forever be etched in the annals of suburban legend. He rounded the corner, his golf attire pristine, his clipboard clutched tightly in his hand, his expression a mixture of smug self-satisfaction and general disapproval. And then he saw it. My windmill. He stopped dead in his tracks, his jaw dropping, his eyes widening in a mixture of horror and disbelief. He looked like he'd just stumbled upon an alien spaceship landing in my backyard, or perhaps a particularly offensive display of oversized garden gnomes. He took a few tentative steps closer, his head tilted, as if trying to understand what he was seeing. Then the screaming started. This is unbelievable!" he shrieked, his voice reaching a pitch that could shatter glass, and probably set off car alarms. He stormed towards my house, his golf shoes clicking furiously on the pavement, his face a mask of apoplectic rage. "You've turned your backyard into a wind farm! It's an abomination!" I emerged from behind the windmill's tower, a picture of calm, unruffled composure. "Good morning, Frank," I said, my voice dripping with feigned politeness. "I see you've noticed my new addition. What do you think? I was going for a modern, eco-friendly aesthetic." "It's a windmill!" he roared, his face now a shade of purple that I'd previously only seen on overripe eggplants. "A giant, monstrous, spinning windmill!" He gestured wildly at the windmill, as if it were some kind of prehistoric beast threatening to devour the neighborhood. "It's a fully HOA-compliant wind-powered energy feature, Frank," I corrected him gently. "I'm embracing renewable energy, doing my part for the environment, being a responsible citizen." I pointed to the mural, "and promoting change. It's outrageous," he sputtered, his voice cracking with fury. It's noisy. It's going to attract birds." He seemed particularly offended by the thought of birds being attracted to my windmill, as if they were some kind of undesirable element. Watching Frank's face contort with rage and disbelief was more satisfying than any gentle breeze could ever be, I thought, struggling to suppress a laugh. He was practically vibrating with indignation, his perfectly pressed golf shirt threatening to come untucked. It was a performance for the ages, a meltdown of epic proportions. Frank, predictably, called an emergency HOA meeting, demanding the immediate removal of my wind-powered monstrosity. He envisioned a swift condemnation, a unanimous vote to dismantle the windmill, a restoration of order and beige to Sunridge Estates. He was, as usual, in for a rude awakening. The meeting, held in the same beige-walled community center room, was a scene of utter chaos. Frank, looking increasingly frantic and disheveled, presented a PowerPoint presentation titled, "The Windmill Menace, a Threat to Our Suburban Serenity." The presentation was a masterpiece of fear-mongering and hyperbole, filled with blurry photos of my windmill, exaggerated claims about its negative impact on property values, and a series of increasingly unlikely scenarios. Slide 1. Noise pollution, disrupting the peace and quiet of our community. With a picture of a cartoon sound wave, labeled Danger. Slide 2. Bird strikes, a threat to local avian populations. With a picture of a cartoon bird flying into a windmill blade. Slide 3. structural instability, risk of collapse, with a picture of a cartoon windmill toppling over onto a house. Slide 4. The complete and utter destruction of our neighborhood's aesthetic harmony, with a picture of my windmill next to a picture of a perfectly manicured, utterly boring beige house. His arguments were met with a mixture of skepticism, amusement, and outright hostility. The other HOA members, it turned out, were not as enthusiastic about banning windmills as Frank had hoped. Some were secretly impressed by my audacity. Others were simply tired of Frank's constant complaining. And a few, I suspected, were secretly hoping I'd offer them a discount on their electricity bills. While Frank fumed and plotted, the rest of the neighborhood was embracing my windmill with open arms. What had started as a source of curiosity and amusement quickly became a point of local pride, a quirky landmark, a symbol of Sunridge Estate's slightly rebellious spirit. Families would stroll by in the evenings, admiring the towering structure, the gracefully rotating blades, and the colorful LED uplighting. People would stop to take pictures, to pose in front of the mural, and to generally marvel at the sheer audacity of building a 50-foot windmill in a suburban backyard. The local university even got involved. A professor from the Environmental Studies department contacted me, asking if he could bring his students to see the windmill, to study its energy output, and to use it as a real-world example of sustainable living. He called it a valuable educational resource and a testament to the power of individual initiative in promoting green energy. It was a public relations triumph, a community relations coup, and a constant, unavoidable reminder of Frank Underwood III's defeat. The windmill, once a symbol of defiance, was now a symbol of unity, a source of neighborhood pride, and a surprisingly effective educational tool. Frank, desperate to regain control, tried one final desperate maneuver. He proposed a new HOA rule, a retroactive rule, specifically banning wind-powered energy structures and any other backyard feature deemed excessively tall, noisy, or aesthetically offensive by the Architectural Review Committee. But it was too late. The HOA's lawyer, the long-suffering Mr. Henderson, a recurring character in my suburban battles, it seemed, explained in excruciating detail that my windmill was grandfathered in. It had been built before any such rule existed, and therefore it was exempt from any new regulations. He went into the specific permits I'd obtained and stressed the legality. He also pointed out that any attempt to force its removal would likely result in a costly and embarrassing lawsuit, a lawsuit that the HOA would almost certainly lose. He even, somewhat hesitantly, suggested that the HOA might want to consider embracing the windmill, perhaps even promoting it as a unique feature of the neighborhood. Frank's face, at this point, was a study in apoplectic rage. He sputtered, he fumed, he threatened, but it was all for naught. The HOA, sensing the shift in power, voted against his proposed rule change. I made sure to repeatedly use the phrase green energy structure throughout, and pointed out I'd happily provide tours for any interested HOA members. The media, alerted to the ongoing saga, ran a follow-up story, this time with the headline, "The Greenest Home in the Suburbs." The article praised my commitment to renewable energy, my innovative approach to landscaping, and my unwavering spirit of defiance in the face of HOA tyranny. It was the final, crushing blow to Frank Underwood III's authority, a public declaration of his defeat, and a testament to the power of a well-placed windmill. The end for Franklin Underwood III, the self-proclaimed guardian of suburban aesthetics, the terror of Weathervanes, came not with a bang, but with a whimper. After the disastrous HOA meeting, the media frenzy, and the undeniable popularity of my windmill, he finally cracked. He resigned from the HOA, his letter of resignation a masterpiece of passive-aggressive self-pity, blaming everyone but himself for his downfall. He claimed he was the victim of a coordinated campaign of harassment, a neighborhood-wide conspiracy to undermine his authority, and a general decline in standards of decency and good taste. He even, in a final act of delusional grandeur, referred to himself as a martyr for the cause of suburban uniformity. Nobody bought it. His departure was met with a collective sigh of relief, followed by a spontaneous neighborhood celebration held naturally in the shadow of my towering windmill. The residents of Sunridge Estates, freed from his iron grip, rejoiced in their newfound freedom, their right to decorate their homes and their roofs however they pleased. Frank's reign of terror was over, his legacy a cautionary tale whispered among the neighbors. My windmill, meanwhile, was thriving. It became a local legend, a quirky landmark, a symbol of the neighborhood's slightly rebellious spirit. People would drive from miles around just to see it, to take pictures, to marvel at the sheer audacity of building a 50-foot windmill in a suburban backyard. It became a popular backdrop for social media posts, graduation photos, and even a few, surprisingly artistic, engagement announcements. Tourists, actual tourists, started showing up, asking for directions to the Windmill House and inquiring about its history. Local businesses started capitalizing on its fame. A nearby coffee shop created a windmill latte, a surprisingly delicious concoction of caramel, cinnamon, and, for some reason, whipped cream. A local gift shop started selling miniature windmill replicas, which, I have to admit, were rather charming. And, in a final twist of irony, the local real estate agents started using the windmill as a selling point for the entire neighborhood. Live in the vibrant community of Sunridge Estates, their listings would proclaim, home of the famous Windmill House. Property values, which Frank had so confidently predicted would plummet, actually increased thanks to the windmill's unexpected popularity. It was the ultimate vindication, a testament to the power of creative defiance, and a giant, spinning middle finger to the forces of beige conformity. To celebrate our victory, and to ensure that the spirit of the windmill lived on, I instituted an annual tradition, the Sunridge Estates Wind Festival. It was a celebration of clean energy, community spirit, and, of course, the glorious absurdity of my 50-foot windmill. We'd have live music, food trucks, games for the kids, and even a build-your-own mini-windmill workshop, sponsored by the local hardware store. The highlight of the festival, of course, was the ceremonial lighting of the windmill, when at sunset I'd flip the switch, illuminating the tower with a dazzling display of colorful LED lights. It was a joyous, festive occasion, a testament to the power of community and a reminder that even the most restrictive of neighborhoods could be transformed by a little bit of imagination and a whole lot of wind power. With Frank gone, the HOA was utterly changed. No longer a tool to enforce petty rules, its focus became one of community. Elections were held, and I even considered running, but thought better of it. I preferred to act as a shadowy advisor, a protector of fun. And so I remained, the unlikely guardian of the great windmill, the accidental champion of suburban freedom. My house, once just another beige box in a row of beige boxes, was now a landmark, a symbol of victory, a testament to the power of creative defiance. It was a warm summer evening. I was sitting on my porch, adjusting my sunglasses, a necessary accessory when living in the shadow of a giant windmill, watching the blades turn slowly and gracefully in the breeze. The LED lights, newly activated for the night, cast a colorful glow over the neighborhood. A new neighbor, a young couple who'd just moved in down the street, walked by. "Excuse me," the woman said. "We're new to the neighborhood. We were just wondering, what's the deal with the giant windmill? I smiled. It's a long story, I said. But the short version is, I had a disagreement with the HOA about a weathervane. They laughed, intrigued. Well, the man said, it's certainly unique. It is, I agreed, it is. Who knew that a weathervane and a burning desire for revenge could lead to all this? I guess sometimes you just gotta build a 50-foot windmill to find your peace, I thought, as I watched the blades turn, generating clean energy and a whole lot of neighborhood pride. I raised my imaginary glass in a silent toast. To the great windmill of Sunridge Estates, may its blades forever turn, generating clean energy, neighborhood pride, and a constant reminder to all future HOA tyrants, don't mess with a homeowner's right to, well, whatever this is.